A few months ago, someone reached out and asked if I could turn this into a full artwork. So I did that, and they provided me the frame, and this is what the finished product turned out to be. Hey there, my name is Tyler with the Kingdoms Trading Card Game, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. This video is going to be showing you a time-lapse progression of how my artwork went from just a little measly square to a full-blown artwork, and I'm going to be showing you the journey of how I went about doing that and what the final product looked like hung on the wall at this person's house. I hope you enjoy. So here we go for the art progression, and as we're going through this, I'm just going to walk you through what you're seeing and what's going on and explaining my thought process behind everything. So like I said at the start of the video, this person looked through all my artwork that I have for the game thus far. So I have about 3 art books full of artwork for the game, and they chose which one they wanted, and this one is matching kind of their color scheme and the furniture in the house, and so this is the one that I went with, or this is the one that they went with, I should say. Now obviously with this being a displayed artwork, I wanted to take the artwork that I had drawn and try to add a little bit more detail to it. If you make your own game, I'm sure you can relate to the fact that when you have so many artworks to draw, maybe you're not able to dedicate as much time and quality as you want to each artwork, so you kind of have to give in some areas, and so for this I'm able to add a little bit more detail than I was when I did the artwork for the card. So what I did was I just got a rough measurement of how big the display frame was going to be for the display, and then I mapped that out onto this big art pad that I have, which this certainly came in handy for this particular project. Then what I did is I mapped it out just to be a wee bit bigger, so that way I had a little bit of flexibility, so that way my artwork wasn't potentially too small so that it didn't even fit the frame properly. And then I went through and I measured the artwork to get it to scale. Now you can see what I just did here. I just shook my finger saying no, is I sent pictures of the progression of this artwork to the person because I just wanted to make sure that it was going to look how they wanted, and they wanted to make sure that the whole artwork filled at least 3/4 of the paper, because at the bottom, and as you'll see near the end of the video, they wanted to see my colors and my art mediums that I use for this project, and that's what I'm kind of indicating right here at the bottom. So I had to adjust some stuff. It's kind of a really rough sketch, so I do have to go back and fix it, and so that's where I start to do that here in this video. So I had done a rough outline, but it just was getting to a point where there were so many pencil sketches and everywhere that I kind of had to start from scratch, but not entirely. So here what I'm doing is I'm just reconfirming that my measurements are correct, and just kind of seeing how much of a border I have to work with, because like I said, I want my artwork to take up the full thing, but I don't want it to be so big that I'm actually having to sacrifice some of the artwork because it's just too big for the display frame. So again, I'm just referencing the original card art design, and I'm rescaling up the artwork so that way it will fit properly in the frame. I use typically a mechanical pencil for all my sketching, and then I'll go through and fine line everything, but I just was trying to get creative and use some of my other art mediums that I have at my disposal for this artwork, and I was trying to stretch myself. I know I still have a lot of room to grow when it comes to my artwork, but this was a huge, this was a blast. I really liked doing this, and I definitely think I stepped up the artwork card, or the artwork for this, compared to the original one, and so I'm just using a harder lead pencil that I don't use a whole lot to get that sketch. Now you can see I have this spoon, and I guess this is where I will share. This artwork is actually for my mother, so thanks Mom for supporting me, I appreciate it. And she wanted me to match the yellow a little bit more towards actually the color of that spoon, because that kind of fits how they have their at least the part of their house decorated in which this picture is going to be displayed. And if you've watched a previous vlog, I actually got that particular color in one of my new Artist Loft marker packs, and it came in the floral pack, and that's marigold, and it matched perfectly. What I just did there is I've had this white pencil for quite some time, and I just never knew how to use it, but as the years have went on, and I literally mean years because I've had this pencil for a couple years now, yeah, I have seen how to use pencils like that and how to do highlights, and so what I did is I wanted to see how a white pencil would possibly show on both alcohol and water-based mediums, and the white pencil actually works fairly well on alcohol mediums, and so I had my thought, and you'll see it as the video progresses, that I would go through with some white highlights at the end, just to give some extra highlights to kind of create some depth and dimension in the artwork. So here I'm going through with my mechanical pencil, which is a softer, I believe it would be a softer lead, to just get more distinct lines. When I went through and I sketched with that harder lead pencil, my lines were really loose, so they weren't really crisp. So with this, I'm kind of going through and setting the fine distinction of what the artwork will look like, and starting to add a little bit of texture for the brick, and just making sure that everything looks good before I actually start laying down the marker. So starting to go through and add the final details, kind of rounding off the helmet, making sure everything looks right. You know, upon looking at the picture when everything was all said and done, I know there is some like anatomy things that maybe aren't correct. Like, for example, the face might be a little bit disproportioned between the nose and the mouth, or maybe even the perspective of the actual dude that this picture is featuring. The arms and the torso might be a little off, but thankfully to my eye, I think it is close enough where it is a passing quality artwork, and something that I'm pleased with. So I went through and I fine lined everything with a pencil. Now I'm starting to kind of clean up my mess before I get going again, and I'm just going through touching up some stuff with my mechanical pencil. And now I'm trying to figure out what I want to outline everything with. Now, normally with my artwork for Kingdoms, as you can see, I just use there. I use Tombow pens. They have 2 calligraphy pens that you can use. One's a harder tip and one's a brush tip. But then they also have their fine line pens, point 1, 3, and 5, and those are the pens that I usually use. However, for an artwork that was this size, I felt like I needed something a little bit thicker, and so I actually just used, I think it was like N15 for the color for my Tombow watermarkers, and I used their actual tip. And all the markers that I use are dual brush, and so the one side is a soft brush and the other side is like a tip, as if it's a pen. And so that's what I decided to use to go through and fine line everything. And this is certainly the most nerve-wracking part, because if you mess up or you get something wrong, it's kind of hard to go back and fix it. I'm sure there are ways to go back and fix it. You know, you can cover it up with some other colors or incorporate maybe some type of design to cover up the flaw, but you still just you want to try to avoid that if you can. So went through, I'm highlighting everything, I'm adding a little bit of dimension that I didn't originally add with a mechanical pencil on this guy's like shoulder plate, and also I will go back and do that with his helmet, just because I wanted to add a little bit more than just like this thin line. Since this is kind of a protection thing, you know, it's his armor, I wanted it to look a little bit better. As I'm drawing, I'll take a couple breaks because I'm just trying to get a good idea of, okay, am I pleased with how this is looking before I start putting ink, at least colored ink, to paper. I'm gonna start erasing with my eraser, and then I realized that I actually didn't draw my lines for the jail cell bars, and so I'm going through and doing that real quick. The eraser that I use, you can see it's bundled up in a little ball right there. This was an eraser that someone got for me quite a long time ago, and I have used it extensively, and it still continues to do its job. And it's this soft eraser. I'll actually grab it right now. It's on my shelf right now as I'm recording this video. It's called Faber-Castell. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And it's just called the Art Eraser, and it's this soft gummy-like material. So typically, you know, when you erase something, it leaves all that, you know, the eraser shards or debris all over your artwork or your paper, and that can be kind of a mess and annoying to use. And this honestly does a really great job. I think the only issue that I've had with it is that it doesn't do amazing with pencil lead that has been on the paper for quite some time, but that could be user error. Again, I'm just a homemade trading card game creator. I'm not doing artwork full time, so, you know, take my art advice or tips with a grain of salt, I guess. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking my alcohol markers, because I wanted to use my alcohol markers for this artwork, because over a large surface for the type of artwork that I do, I don't think my watercolor markers look the best on a big surface like this, especially because a lot of my artwork has very concrete lines. It's not very my artwork doesn't necessarily fit the style of what watercolor is able to achieve, though I do have some cards in the game that do fit watercolor rather appropriately. So the alcohol markers, I think, just come down smoother, and so that's my choice of what I'm going with. So what I did is I just set down my color palette and just trying to match the colors as best as I can. Thankfully, I already had this grayscale pack of Tombow markers, and a lot of the colors that are in the original artwork are gray. And so I'm just getting all that ready to go, and then I'm going to start mapping out which color needs to go where. And I'm also seeing how well I can blend the two yellows together, because I do want to add some highlights to the kind of shoulder plate and the arm guards, if that's what you want to call them. So here I am going through with the marigold color, which is the color that matches that spoon. Going through and hitting that first. Correct me if I'm wrong, or if you have any art experience yourself, I'd be curious in the comments below. At least for watercolor markers, what I have noticed, at least when I'm doing highlights and shadows, I always start with the darkest part first and work my way towards the light. And that's what I have found works best with the watercolor markers. Again, that's because of what I am drawing and how I am drawing. So I'd be curious to see, is that the same for alcohol markers? That's what I did here in this, and it seemed to work pretty okay. But it could just be, the two colors I'm using are pretty similar, and I don't use the alcohol medium a whole lot, and so part of it could just be unfamiliarity in using it. So here I am just trying to blend it all in, making everything look as smooth and as crisp as possible. Now, whenever I do artwork, I like to listen to some podcasts and to music. I'm curious, what do you like to listen to, or do you have any YouTube videos that you like to watch? When I was doing this artwork, you might see it later on in this video. There was a big tournament for a video game that I love to play. It's called Age of Empires, and there was a tournament called NAC4 that was going on, and so I was watching the live stream occasionally while I was working on this artwork. So here I am going through with a darker gray to provide some shade, kind of showing like the depth of the helmet and that shoulder plate. And then I think this was the end of my first day that I was actually doing artwork, actually drawing it. So now I'm going to go here and get back to it. I'm recording this all on my GoPro, recording it in 4K, hoping to try to get some better quality. Anyways, I'm going through and now starting with the background. Now, I don't know what the proper approach would be for coloring something like this, but this is the way I did it seemed to work out for me, and so that's what I did. So I first started by going through by coloring the background of the jail, and so I wanted to try to create some depth in the artwork. In the original artwork, the background was actually a lighter gray as well, and actually kind of matched the color of the guard's armor and the brick, and so I wanted to try to create some depth, and thankfully I had enough grays to do that, so I wanted to make the background a lot darker. So I continue to go through and color in everything and just taking my time, especially around the border, especially with this darker gray. I wanted to be careful to not accidentally go over on the yellow or the light gray, the future light gray of the guard's armor. So after I do that, I'm eventually going to take my next color and start working my way through some other parts of the picture. With this being alcohol-based ink, I didn't happen to notice any ink getting on my hand as I was drawing through. But again, learning to work with the art medium, and so I wonder if there was a different way that I could have handled this project. Now, these markers that I have had, specifically the grayscale ones, I've had for some time now, and though I haven't used them in any Kingdoms artwork, the ink has been used up a little bit, and so it felt like the ink was starting to go a little bit, specifically in the color that I was using to color the guy's armor and the surrounding brick, but thankfully everything turned out to be just fine and nice and smooth, which I was happy with. Next, I'm going through with actually the same color that I used to color the background and coloring this brick that is located above the soldier. So now here you can see I've made it pretty far into the artwork, and I've colored everything except the guy's skin, the jail bars, and now what I've went through and done is added a little bit of shadow on the guy's armor, so my light source is coming from the right side. you can say. And now I'm just trying to figure out what other colors I want to use specifically for the skin tone, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to use for the actual jail bar cells, because I'm kind of running out of color options and I wasn't sure what to do. And to be truthful, once everything was all said and done, I wasn't crazy about the color I ended up choosing for the jail bar cells, but I think it still looked okay. And to change it up, I actually used some of my watercolor markers to do this and to do a couple other things in this. So I went through and did that, and thankfully, you know, I wanted to try to stay in the lines, but the alcohol ink and the water-based ink they don't fight with each other too much, so it was easy to not really creep over into the other colors. As I'm doing that, you can see that I went through and colored the guy's skin, and I used 3 different colors, again working my way from dark to bright, and I was really happy with how that turned out. And then I was just trying to figure out, okay, what other details could I add to this? And so what I wanted to do was eventually go through with one more shade of shade, a darker shade I should say, on the guy's armor, as well as some white highlight pencil on the guy's armor. So now what I'm getting ready to do here is actually grab all the colors that I have used in the artwork, and now I'm trying to figure out how I want to display them below the artwork, because that was something that this person wanted, that my mom wanted. She wanted to see all the colors and the art mediums that I had used, and this is something that I actually do with all of my markers that I have in art supplies. Is I have a sheet of paper where I show what they look like and I write the numbers or the letters below them, so that way I always have access to what my color palette is and what the markers look like on the different art mediums. So now at this part of the video, the artwork is officially done, and now I'm trying to figure out how I want to put it in the actual art display. You can see I was contemplating cutting it, but then I had the thought, you know what, maybe I'll just fold up all the other paper that you know, is not part of the artwork, and then I'll be able to stuff it under. And so that way it's kind of cool where, you know, if the artwork ever gets switched out for something different, someone could actually take this out and see all of the kind of the extra work and prep that went into it. So I was actually really glad I did that versus cutting it, because it gave me a little bit of flexibility too with moving it in the frame. So here I am taking it out in the frame, setting it in there. I had to do a couple of adjustments. Definitely learned a lot in doing this artwork on stuff that I could do better, making sure everything was aligned and looked okay, but I was really pleased with how this turned out. And there you can see the final product. And I'm curious, let me know what you guys think. You can see some of those white pencil highlights, and I just think this is such a step up from the original artwork, and I'm really pleased with how this turned out.
Go hang it on the wall. I got the screw over there. I don't know if you see it.
Where?
Over there.
Over here.
How will it look?
I think I gotta fold. I want to thank you guys again for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Anything that I want you to know about is in the description box below. And before I do end this video, I want to end with a Bible talk. In scripture, there's a lot of verses that talk about reflection and being patient and walking in wisdom. And so I think it's both an encouragement for both you and for I, and this was something that I'm going to do once I'm done recording this video and a couple other videos, to take some time to reflect on our life, to see, is this life that we are living good? Is the way that we are orienting our lives, are the things that we're pursuing, are those good, or are there things that we need to take out or we need to switch direction? Whatever time of the day that you're watching this video, whether it be the morning, evening, or night, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks.